But first tonight, accusations that Anthony Albanese has misled voters about why his son had Chairman's Lounge access. This comes as Peter Dutton accuses Albanese of breaching the Ministerial Code of Conduct. He's also said this entire matter should be referred to the Corruption Commission for investigation. Now, this has now become a political scandal. Albanese is accused of misleading voters over why he asked the Qantas chief executive, Alan Joyce, for a Chairman's Lounge access for his son, Nathan. Now, when this revelation first emerged over a year ago, Albanese refused to comment on it at all. The Prime Minister had never disclosed this gift on his register of interests. But this week, he finally spoke about it, and he claimed that his son was his new +1. Have a look.
All that happened was my relationship ended. My relationship ended in my +1 when that happened, and I put out a media release when my marriage ended. You can't be more transparent than that. And my +1 became my son.
Well, that seemed to satisfy the journalists at the press conference. But is it true? Not quite. Albanese claimed, as you heard, that Carmel Tebbit was his +1. But in fact, I'm told that she had her own Qantas Chairman's Lounge access, completely independent of Albanese. And she was, of course, Deputy Premier in New South Wales and also Education Minister. And secondly, by the time Albanese asked Alan Joyce to give his son the lounge access, well, he'd split up from Carmel Tebbit around 3 years earlier. Joe Aston explains this discrepancy in the interview I've done with him that's airing on the show tonight. Have a look.
I find that an implausible explanation because Jodie Hayden was disclosed by Albanese in his register of interest in October 2022 as Albanese's +1. So how can his son be his +1?
There's just so many holes in all of Albanese's answers, and Joe Aston coming up on the show a bit later. He also responds to the claims from Albanese that the journalist is targeting his family by focusing on his son's Chairman's Lounge access. So what we've seen today, and you know this by now, that the Prime Minister is now attacking Joe Aston, a journalist, instead of just being straightforward and honest and open with voters about all of this. Albanese repeatedly promised that he was going to do politics differently, but we're not seeing transparency. We're only seeing attacks on Aston.
The person who is trying to sell a book, and fair enough, I don't see declarations that he's a former Liberal Party staffer for a number of senior members of the Liberal Party, including Joe Hockey and Bruce Baird. I don't see declarations that he's a former Qantas employee. I don't see declarations that in June, just a few months ago, he was a guest, him and John Howard, at a Liberal Party fundraiser in the electorate of Wentworth.
I mean, come on, this is petulant. Seriously. A Prime Minister under scrutiny for integrity issues starts attacking a journalist? Albanese cannot avoid answering questions by hitting out at Joe Aston. Not that it's relevant, but Joe Aston's disclosures are pretty clear. On page 1 of this book, he discloses that he did previously work for both Qantas and the Liberal Party. And by the way, that's probably why he has such good access to intel. It's beside the point. This isn't about Aston's disclosures. He's not getting a taxpayer-funded salary. He's not answerable to voters. This is about Albanese's disclosures. That's what matters. And Albanese also refused to directly answer questions about whether he requested or solicited the gifts from his mate, Alan Joyce.
Did you call Alan Joyce personally for these upgrades?
The idea, Qantas have a number in terms of bookings that are private bookings.
So no denial at all, just yet again deflection by talking about some private number. And on that, what is he talking about? A number for private bookings? The Qantas number that you and I have access to is the 131313 number, where you're left on hold for hours. The number Albanese had for private bookings, for upgrades, is Alan Joyce's personal mobile number. He was basically his travel agent. And today we saw Albanese also try to attack his political opponents for the number of upgrades that they've had. I mean, it's like a child saying, "Oh, but that kid also stole a lollipop." This is extraordinary stuff from the Prime Minister, who promised a new era of transparency in politics.
I want to bring people together and I want to change the way that politics is conducted in this country. And I do believe that we can do politics better, and I hope to do so.
Well, maybe Albanese should read up on the Code of Conduct for Ministers, because it does state that, yep, they're allowed to accept gifts, but they must not seek or encourage any form of gift in their personal capacity. That's a direct quote. And there are now quite serious questions over whether the Prime Minister breached those ministerial Code of Conduct rules. And Peter Dutton says he has.
Well, certainly on the face of reading the Gillard Government Ministerial Code of Conduct, the Prime Minister has breached that by his own admission.
At no point has Albanese denied that he personally asked Alan Joyce for upgrades worth tens of thousands of dollars. And if he asked for them, it would be in breach, as I've just shown you, of the Ministerial Code of Conduct. Parliament resumes next week, so it's very possible that if Albanese doesn't refer himself to the Corruption Commission, which, let's be frank, he's not going to, then the coalition might make that referral. Just months out from the federal election, things couldn't be looking worse for Albanese.